In this lecture on deployment, I'm going to look at the concept of infrastructure as code, continuous deployment, and continuous application deployment and application and infrastructure deployment. Look at the options available for updating our applications and our infrastructure, and also look at the concept of blue-green deployments. Infrastructure as code, and this is something that you'll hear a lot in any conversation around AWS, and that allows our infrastructure to be managed in the same way as we would software code. For example, we might have a CloudFormation template, and that is simply a JSON text file, and we can manage that with version control as we would any other code. So example of that, of course, the CloudFormation template, as I've said, is a good example of that, but also the CloudFormation Designer. And that's another really good tool that not only has CloudFormation templates, but also has a graphical user interface that allows for drag and drop creation of flowcharts that define our CloudFormation template. We can also look at having version control around our AMIs. So continuous deployment of our application. Now that is around the automated delivery of production ready code, and it allows rapid deployment and rollback if necessary. So examples of continuous deployment include code commit, which is AWS's Git repository or Git repository service. We have code pipeline, which is another very, very good tool for developers, which allows you to define a pipeline of stages for releases and what is required for a release to progress to the next stage through to a production release. We have Elastic Beanstalk, which allows for very rapid deployment of any updated code to the infrastructure that is defined on Elastic Beanstalk. We have OpsWorks, which uses chef recipes to define our application. And we also have Elastic Container Services, which use Docker containers. We can also have continuous deployment of both our application and our infrastructure. And examples of that again are code pipeline, code commit, Elastic Beanstalk, because we can actually make changes in Elastic Beanstalk to our infrastructure as well as changes to our application code. And chef recipes in OpsWorks can define our infrastructure as well as our application, and of course containers in the Docker containers in the ECS service. We can also have hybrid deployments, and that is quite common, where we would separate our database from our application layer or parts of our application, our infrastructure deployments, and that would create a hybrid deployment and would really focus on continuous deployment of those areas that are changing and really keeping stable our areas that are not necessarily changing that often, such as our database. So the options available for us for updating our application, so we can look at pre-baking AMIs, and that's certainly an option, but not a great option, where you would just keep creating another AMI every time your application code updates. It's a slow way of doing that, and expensive way of doing that. We can look at an in-place upgrades, where we use live EC2 instances and we apply updated code to those live EC2 instances. And we can also look at disposable upgrades, and they're quite handy because we can roll out new EC2 instances with our new code, and then when that is up and running and stable, then we can terminate our older instances, and that allows for a more staged deployment, and it allows us to progress slowly across until we've got all of our EC2 instances upgraded to our new code. Another concept that we need to be aware of is blue-green deployments, and they are stage rollouts from an existing blue environment while testing a new green environment. It uses domain name service. It'll use Route 53 to increase traffic to a green environment from a blue environment in a staged process. So what that means is that we look at the diagram there, we can start off with 90% of our traffic going to the blue existing environment, and then just put 10% of our traffic over to the new green environment, and then slowly shift that over from, we might make it 80, then 20, and then 70 and 30, until such point that we've got all of our traffic going over to our green environment. And that is very good from a risk management perspective, because we're not exposing us 100% of our end users to any problems. But it does require doubling up on our resources. So it is expensive from the point of at a certain point in time, or for a certain period of time, we need to have 2 environments running at the same time. So that brings us to the end of our lecture on deployment. I'll see you in the next lectures.